Guys, and welcome back to my channel and welcome to my geography channel. As it's a Monday, I am doing a geography video. I know we've been paused for a long time, like ever since October of 2023, haven't posted on the geography channel. Today it's the 20th of March 2024, but I plan on getting this channel back. I'm planning on quitting this break. It's too much for me. Let's just get started. Today I spun a wheel. And this wheel had the name of every country in the world in it. And it landed on El Salvador, this little country. This wheel means the country that is going to form an empire. This is a fictional scenario. It's not meant to offend anybody, but today El Salvador is going to be forming an empire, getting land, and yeah, it's gonna be a little buff throughout this video because it couldn't do this by itself. Like, it's surrounded by stronger nations, and it's the only country in Central America that only borders one ocean. I mean, I forgot Belize, but yeah, that's mostly it. So today it's a different one, as El Salvador is a kind of weak country. It's not really strong at all. But you know what they can do? They can expand their water area by just shipping out their military. I think military is like that. You can just put your military out into anywhere you want, and countries start to get intimidated, but they see it's El Salvador and not much of a threat. But El Salvador keeps projecting its navy around the world. I mean, they don't get too close to the US. So something like this, they put their navy around the Galapagos Islands of Ecuador, and Ecuador loses access. They protest in the UN, but nobody cares. They say it's El Salvador and it won't do anything bad, because El Salvador is a globally good country. A month after they've started their campaign, they're already going through the west coast of Chile, and they go through the north coast of Chile. They reach the Falklands, but they don't want to be too mean to the UK, so they immediately retreat. Then they go up above Argentina, Uruguay, go through Brazil, and then they start heading towards the Guianas, and now they're starting to get near Venezuela and the Caribbean, which is fine. They get to the Caribbean, they avoid Puerto Rico at all times. They get to like the Bahamas. This is like gonna be a naval empire. They're not touching Florida at all. In the US, they don't want that at all. They have Cuba, the island of Hispaniola. So they have something like this. This is like a weird thing. They don't want to get too close to US allies, so they won't intimidate them as much, but they're gonna intimidate Cuba, of course. They're like strong on Cuba. Then, yeah, they go close to Colombia. They touch Colombia. They go up Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras. They're literally at the other side. If this was water, they would have been able to just go there, but they had to go down through. So yeah, it's been like 2 months since this operation started. And no, of course they couldn't go through the Panama Canal because it's like an international zone not used for military. Now they go up the Gulf of Mexico and don't get too close to Texas, as they don't want to intimidate the US because it's like the strongest country in the world, and you don't want to anger them. So they just do whatever they can. So they have all of South America and Central America engulfed in their navy, but they let them through stuff. So yeah. Then they expand their navy towards the Pacific Ocean, and they want to get to the Pacific Islands. I'm sorry, I'm not the best at these Pacific Islands, but let's say they invade these and get them for themselves. Like, nobody really cares about them because they're just some islands in the Pacific, probably independent, that don't like even know how to govern a country. I don't want to be mean, but yeah. They get all of the islands that are not controlled by the US. I don't really know which ones are and which ones aren't. But yeah, so like in magazines, it says extension of El Salvador's navy, which I don't know how they have such a big one. Puerto Rico is literally like screaming for breath. Then they expose their military to the mighty little islands of Bahamas, which are beautiful. I've been there. They just declare war on them. And Bahamas can't even breathe. And I don't even know if they have a military. They're probably protected by the US. Well, let's just say the US withdraws because they're scared of this buffed El Salvador. So El Salvador starts island hopping for some reason. I don't know why they would want that. But yeah, and they easily get most of the islands. And then, yeah, they get Nassau, the capital of Bahamas, and Bahamas surrenders. By the way, throughout this video, El Salvador will be colored as red because they're forming the empire. Even if someone declares war on them, they'll still be red. Then El Salvador looks at Jamaica and says, I want you. But in the real sense of the term, I want you. Yeah, in days, they just completely obliterate the entire island. And in this peace treaty, Jamaica is completely occupied by El Salvador. Then some UN peacekeeping forces slightly push out the El Salvador Navy because they don't need to be there. And with some strong US-backed army, they can cut off the eastern and western parts of the Navy and restore peace to these countries as the Navy goes back to their mother country and are instructed to not leave their homeland again. But the uselessly independent island nations, let's say it's just like these ones, like the Marshall Islands, I know they're like something important for the shipment, like sea things, they still get annexed by El Salvador, but like American Samoa and Guam, no way. They just, yeah. So El Salvador is instructed to push their navy a little more towards themselves, but they won't do it perfectly. Like they annex some Chilean islands, but they get a little bit smaller, the navy. So they can't go as much island hopping because before they could literally invade the Philippines from where they were. Like they were here. Then El Salvador take advantage of the weak country of Haiti. They declare war on it and they immediately invade. Some rebellious groups pop up trying to help El Salvador, and some other rebellious groups pop up too, trying to get their own independence. But as you know, no one wants to split Hispaniola again, but this purple team is trying to block off the red team. And so they can link up easily and block the red team. But the red team immediately is able to push out their own zones. And it gets to this. Then somehow these purple rebels say they'll retreat from the place, particularly the ones that are close to this red team. The red team manages to cut the purple country in half, but they're still linked up here, so not really in half. And they cut them some more here, and it's war between the red and purple team now. But finally, El Salvador manages to cut them off, get them off balance, and they surrender. In this peace treaty, they're completely annexed by El Salvador. The Dominican Republic next door has mixed feelings. First, they're happy that their neighbor isn't completely terrorized anymore, but they feel intimidated that El Salvador is literally in their doorstep. Next, El Salvador declares war on Belize, as this is easier for them to get to the other side of the place, other side of Central America. This is their first continental Central American country they'll invade. So they start a naval landing from the east, and they easily sweep through. And as you can see, they've captured Belize City, which is out here on the first days of the war, and they can easily get them to fall out of control, and their prime minister, I think, dies, and yeah, it's not looking good. And as always in this peace treaty, they get completely annexed. El Salvador gets to negotiate with the UN to get control over Tonga. So they do. And they get, I think these are the Solomon Islands, which it doesn't matter, they get them. If they got Christmas Island accidentally, then let them have Christmas Island. And I believe this is Palau. They get Palau too. If it's not Palau, then let's just say they traded for this island. But I'm pretty sure they got Palau, the Marshall Islands, the Solomon Islands, Tonga, Fiji, and that's the end of their conquest for the Pacific. Then they declare war on the nice country of Honduras. That's sad and mean. I mean, they're mean, so Honduras has done literally nothing to hurt them. But anyways, this is their first neighbor they'll invade. And they get their capital of Tegucigalpa. I'm sorry if I said that wrong, Tegucigalpa. Don't worry, it's not like I know all these capitals by heart. I mean, Europe, I do, but I just search for the capitals that I don't know. Like these Central American capitals, I don't know them, I just searched. El Salvador makes some powerful gains, and they sweep through the rest of Honduras until Honduras is forced to surrender. In this peace treaty, El Salvador annexes all of Honduras. Then the UN comes back to knock on El Salvador's door, saying that now, since they have access to the Atlantic by their mainland, they don't need all of this navy. So El Salvador's navy gets pushed out by the UN, forced out, and I guess they'll keep this island. They get to keep these two islands, which I believe were Chilean before, but the UN permits them. Like, these islands were suffocated from Chile, and Chile lost control. And they get pushed north until Ecuador. They keep their naval access over Ecuador. So it goes like this. And Puerto Rico argues for at least to be safe at this radius, and it is accepted. These Caribbean nations also ask for freedom, but no one listens to them, so there is no freedom. And Puerto Rico wants access to the US. And so there are two proposed ways that they can choose, and El Salvador has no word in it. This one that links them up with Florida, or this one that just frees them up. But here is US controlled waters, so like basically everything here. And they want all of this with Puerto Rico. And so something like this here, and yeah, basically this. But if you want actual US controlled waters, let's just look at this instead. I mean, not really, because there's like, I'm sorry, I don't even know Africa, please tell me. But because there's international waters, this is probably really wrong, but I think I got it mostly right. I mean, yeah, here, yeah, I believe so. But I actually don't know. Like, pretty sure this, but I don't think they're US allies. I don't know. But anyways, let's go back to the video. So now I don't know which one Puerto Rico would choose. So, like, get everything here, be free, or sabotage the red team because they can. I would say just like be free. The US would say be free. So like if you guys didn't know, Puerto Rico is part of the US. It got annexed a few years ago. Like not a few years ago, a few decades ago. But yeah, it's part of the US. Then in order to improve relations with the US and get a little bit of land, El Salvador offers the US some nice traditional bonding time. also known as invading Cuba in separate teams, but just to improve the relations, you know? The US said, of course I'll do that with you. So like I just changed the color of the territorial waters because yeah, it's fun. But I mean, the US is only doing that because Cuba's a horrible place and they're communist and no one likes that. I mean, seriously, red flags. Like, why are they communists? They cannot be if they want to. So yeah, their military immediately surrounds Cuba, so something like that. But El Salvador keeps persisting with this island. They're not gonna give it up. The US accepts. So they declare war on Cuba. They did not expect that, but I mean, they saw the navies coming though. But Cuba does put up a fight. Immediately, they lose access to this island, but they try to gain it back. And so it's kind of like a distraction for them. And then they surround them and make a little landing, but just to help the US. Then some troops from Florida come down and they reach northern Cuba. And they go and their goal is to completely hit Havana. So they have Havana and Cuba kind of falls apart and like some pro-US things happen here and some anti-US like pro-El Salvador, you know, pro something else comes up in the West. El Salvador obviously wants to keep good relations with the US, but this is like an opportunity for them to gain land. So this is how they end up, and let's see if they follow their plan. So in the peace treaty, El Salvador really wants to keep this western part of Cuba, but in the end, the US manages to buy it out for a lot of money and for better relations with El Salvador. Our 51st state, people. Now we could add Puerto Rico, Washington, D.C. So yeah, here's the US Navy. And the US, I don't know why I called it yellow. It just looks like mustard or pea. So let's make it white again, like everything. By the way, throughout this video, tell me if anything is wrong. If anything in this video is wrong, I'll subscribe to you. And I'll like your comment, pin it, and heart it. The first comment. The rest, I'll just follow you guys. Then El Salvador finally declares war on Guatemala so they can unite their continental territories. Relations with Guatemala have been going down, and El Salvador gets kind of strongly invaded by Guatemala, which want them to stay away from their territory. I guess I would understand them. Well, they don't get to San Salvador yet. I knew that. I didn't have to search that in the internet. But yeah, they completely get all of Belize. But then El Salvador can make a naval landing into Guatemala and they invade north. And they get to their capital of Guatemala City. Then the Guatemalan officials order all troops to get out of El Salvador and push out the Salvadorans from their capital. When they go back to Guatemala City, they see it in ruins. They understand El Salvador had plundered their capital city. And they can't get any further because El Salvador has gotten really stronger. But after a few months, they started conscriptions and promised big cash prizes for the families of anybody who was willing to join the Salvadoran military to invade Guatemala. That made them really powerful, and at the end, Guatemala surrenders. Then El Salvador just straight up annexes all of these countries, these Caribbean countries, and they get to Trinidad and Tobago, which just surrender to them. Like, they say it's not worth fighting, and it's not that bad to be part of El Salvador, if you actually think about it. For their last task before they retire from war, they declare war on Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. They immediately throw a naval landing into Nicaragua from the east, and they invade militarily from the north and from the west navally too. And at the end, Nicaragua surrenders. Usually the U.S. protects Costa Rica and Panama, which have abolished their militaries, in order to fund other things, but they didn't, since they'd rather have a powerful ally instead of two weak ones. Costa Rica surrenders, and Panama gets invaded until the last bit. But the Panama Canal is lended over to the Americans. So yeah, I mean, sure, we'll represent this on this map, but usually it would just like show like this. I remember the old maps. It didn't show the strip the US had, it just showed this. I said it was the last task, but bingo, you didn't know that they are going to invade a last country. This one's the actual last country. It's the Dominican Republic. So naval landings, yeah, and the US doesn't protect them. And at the end, they're like, okay, this is the last country you invade. Let's not get too imperialist right now when they are an empire, but yeah, that's it. El Salvador got every country it wanted. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. It took a lot of time, but I also enjoyed it very much. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!